Hello everyone. In the process of building agentic frameworks using AutoGen, we have been dealing with different conversational patterns, but we never have dealt with creating custom agentic workflows like referencing the databases specific to your organization or invoking the API endpoints related to your organizational needs and necessities. So that's not what we have done so far. We always have created different types of agents and implemented a specific workflow like a sequential chat pattern or a nested chat pattern. And we basically have used the power of LLM to solve some problems for us. But that's not always the case, right? So in this particular exercise and in the following exercises to come, we basically are making use of this IMDb dataset and read this particular dataset by using an agent. So we basically would write a user-defined function. This user-defined function reads the data from a IMDb dataset, which preferably is a CSV file, and it in turn writes it back to a database, right? Which can be later used by any other underlying agents. But we are registering this whole user-defined function to this particular agent, right? And we are letting the orchestrator or we are letting the LLM invoke this particular user-defined function, especially when we trigger this agent. So that's the whole exercise that we are planning to implement now. Okay, let's get back to this VS Code where I basically have defined a DB file. I just want to write my data that I read from IMDb database and write it back to a specific SQLite database. And hence I have imported SQLite 3. This package basically is going to help me establish a connection and preferably look at writing the data frame back to a particular database table here. Okay, so this is a NoSQL database as you clearly know about it. And now, since I have defined the path of my DB file, I also have later looked at loading all my environment variables. Now I'm pointing to GPT-4.1 model and the respective base URL and API key is provided here. And I've provided an additional parameter, which is timeout of 120 seconds. Okay. However, let's actually begin writing code where we are necessarily creating a user proxy agent at the beginning. The user proxy agent will typically involve name of the agent, which is going to be user, system message, which typically is the role of the agent here. So I basically have copied the role of user agent here in a particular text file. So in the interest of our time, I'm pasting the same message here and let me indent this properly. And once we set up the system message, we are also looking at setting up the code execution config. Since this is a user proxy agent, I'm setting it to false for now. The human input mode can be terminate. Let's also provide LLM config here. So LLM config is nothing but LLM config that we have set up previously. This is the LLM config that I'm referring to. Cool. So once user proxy agent is being set up, now let me also look at setting up the assistant agent, which here is the data assistant. So data assistant is the agent that's going to help me load this particular IMDb data from this particular CSV file, which is placed in the same directory. And once we read the data, I'm also going to write that to a specific SQLite database. Okay. The database name here is going to be state.db. Okay. Cool. So the assistant agent gets the name of data assistant like it deserves, like we are trying to pull the data from a CSV file and write it back to a NoSQLite database or NoSQL database to be more precise. Now let me define the system message. System message is nothing but the role of the data assistant. I have clearly stated in the system message that this is responsible for loading the data set using load data function or tool that is registered, right? So do not generate code for load function because we are explicitly going to write this user defined function called load function and later looking at registering that particular user defined function to this agent called data assistant. So that's our job, right? So once this is done, I'm just going to hand off the conversation back to the user agent, and we are not going to terminate under any other circumstances without actually completing the data load here. Apart from system messages, we are also going to set up the code execution config for this. Though this is an assistant agent, I am planning to set up code execution config. So use Docker here is going to be false, and the working directory here is going to be code. So this is a relative path that I have provided currently, and let's also provide LLM config here. And that completes the setup of data assistant. So as I have mentioned, we need to write this user defined function called load function with a specific parameter called file name. So file name here acts as a parameter that we always need to supply while calling this function, right? So I'm also going to provide this additional validation that this is a string object, right? So this here is going to be a string. The file name, the parameter that we are currently referring to is going to be a string, and the result is always going to be a data frame object. And hence I'm going to provide pd.dataframe. So I'm just providing the necessary annotations here. So once that's done, I'm going to parse a file path by making use of this file name, writing an interpolated f string with a given path. I know absolute path, so I'm directly providing the absolute path so that there is no confusion at all. So group chat is a folder, is my current working directory, and hence I have provided the complete path. And now let me provide whatever parameter value that I receive during this function invocation. So pd.read_csv, let me provide the file path within parentheses, which is going to get assigned to this data frame called data. So now with SQLite 3.connect, so I'm just going to establish a connection string first for SQLite database by using this db file that I already have defined, which is shared_state.db, right? I'm just calling this as cyn. So with this connection string, we are now going to load this data frame called data into a particular database that which I'm calling it as imdb_data. This is the database name using this connection called cyn that we already have defined. So if this table already exists, if you can see here, the table is already existing. If it exists, I'm going to replace that particular table, right? And index is going to be set to false. I don't want index to be populated within the result data frame or within the result table that I'm going to write the data into. So once this is done, I'm going to return the data. That's all. So this is the user defined function that we have just defined. And this is what we need to register. If you look at this particular method called register_function that we already have imported from AutoGen, we'll make use of that register function method. And we basically look at providing the name of this function within this register function method. So the name of the function is going to be load data. And once we already have set up this name of this function within register function here, so we are going to provide caller information. Caller is going to be user agent. Executor is going to be data assistant. Along with caller and executor, you also can provide the name of the function, which we are explicitly stating now, right? We are explicitly stating the name of the function. So the function here is load_data, right? And that's what we have defined here. Along with all of these parameters, let's also provide a clear description for this. So this function load_data with the parameter file name loads the IMDb data, right? IMDb movie dataset, and writes the result into shared_state.db, right? Perfect. So we have done the setup. We have registered the function properly to data assistant. We clearly know that the executor is going to be data assistant itself, whereas a caller is going to be the user agent. So far, there are only two agents, one of which is user agent. The other one is going to be the data assistant here. So now let's go about initiating a chat with the data assistant here. We clearly know that we need to pass a particular message while initiating a conversation, which might comprise of role of this as well as content of this message, right? I'm going to provide the role as user, and the content here is going to be the information, the first hand information, right when we start the conversation. So this is the content. So there are two different steps that I'm planning to implement here. So I can explicitly state execute the, or probably this is a two-step process. This is a two-step process. Execute the below steps in order. And that's it. Finally, we'll also state, please ensure all the steps are completed in sequence. And once the result is obtained, please terminate. What are these steps? The first step here is going to invoke the data assistant, which internally loads the dataset with file name providing the file name explicitly here so that the LLM understands what could be the file name and parses it as a parameter while invoking the function. And we are also stating what the function is, load data, and we're also explicitly providing the file name here. Load data, and finally, once the data is loaded, we're also instructing to actually write the data back to shade underscore shade DB, and the table name here is going to be imdb underscore data. The second step is to return and print the loaded data. That's all. So we just wanted to see if the data is loaded properly or not, and that's why I'm asking explicitly to return and print the data here. That's all. So since this is done, let me also provide max turns. Max turns here is going to be 20, and that's it. That marks the end of the complete code here. And let me run this code. So first user invokes the assistant with all the initial message that we have given, and later data assistant is loading the data set. And we clearly know that the suggested tool call here is going to be load data function, and it's explicitly taking this file name as imdb underscore dataset.csv file, which is residing in the same subdirectory here. And we can also see that the data is being returned. The user agent finally returns the complete data back to the user. It's returning the complete data. But please note that you can additionally look at creating or expanding this workflow to involve multiple other agents. You basically now know on how you can define a function, a user defined function, like point to a specific file system, get the data from the file system, and probably look at writing it to a different database. And this particular user defined function can be anything. It can simply point to an existing database always, right? So that's all in this particular session, and thanks for watching.